Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And hey, we are approximately, I think it's 170 people away from 12,000 subscribers. Only about 170 people. This is awesome. Okay. So get busy, get your friends, get your neighbors. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Help us reach the goal of 12,000 subscribers before the first of the year. I mean, here we are, November the 3rd, right? First, second, third, something like that. So help us out. This is the second, third, fourth, I guess. Like I said, I don't keep up with calendars real well. Okay. Well, as promised, we're continuing our study of Shemeni Atzerat, the eighth day feast, the feast in Israel's calendar that represented, symbolized, rehearsed the new beginning, the new creation. All you got to do is read the literature, ladies and gentlemen. And I've had people just almost froth at the mouth in objection to that. But they haven't read the literature. Not at all. They just want to wave their hand at it. But waving your hand at something that you disagree with does not prove it wrong. And ridicule is not refutation, by the way. So anyway, I made the point, a point that I make repeatedly in this book. These are the days in which all things must be fulfilled. And I do not know, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you've caught the power of the point. I can tell you this. I've been a preterist now since 1989, somewhere along in there, 88, 89, somewhere along in, maybe even just a little bit beforehand. Like I said, I have a tough time keeping up with dates. I do remember my anniversary for that. Got to say that. Okay, so I never connected the dots of this reality. Throughout the Tanakh, the Old Testament, you have all of these predictions of the kingdom, the judgment, the resurrection, the harvest, etc., etc. Now, I knew that. I preached that. I even knew that they made the prediction that those things would be fulfilled in the days of the Roman Empire. Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 12. Yeah, I knew that. I preached it. I debated it. I knew that those things were to be fulfilled in the last days. Isaiah chapter 2, 2 and following. But it wasn't until a few years ago, I've forgotten exactly the year, but it wasn't until a few years ago that, that flash, that clap of thunder, as it was, no, not literally, that thunderbolt hit me. Wait a minute, Preston. You're overlooking something. What you are overlooking is that in every one, virtually every one, of those Old Testament prophecies, of the eschatological consummation, once again, the coming of the Lord, the judgment, the resurrection, the harvest, salvation, forgiveness. Every one, virtually every one, of those prophecies is couched in a context that teaches, that says, sometimes explicitly, other times not quite as explicit as others, but nonetheless sufficiently explicit to know that the prediction of those eschatological elements would occur at the time of the judgment of Old Covenant Israel and Jerusalem. And like I said, that was just kind of like a thunderbolt. It is kind of like the thunderbolt that says all of those eschatological elements had to be fulfilled at the time of the judgment of the first century temple and city. Not a future rebuilt city or temple. No, that doctrine is not in the Bible. So you have the kind of these twin thunderbolts, all eschatological prophecies were to be fulfilled at the time of the destruction of the first century. Not a later temple, not a tribulation temple, not a yet future millennial temple, but the first century temple. I wrote a book on that, Temple to Telos. It's on my website. That was an astounding revelation. Many people have told me so. But equally astounding is this fact, again, that I develop extensively in this particular book. These are the days when all things must be fulfilled. And I document passage after passage after passage in the Old Testament in which you find an eschatological prophecy joined with, married to, inseparably so, the prediction of the destruction of Jerusalem. Invariably so, ladies and gentlemen. Now, for today's video, let me just read. I'm just going to jump in. Okay, I'll be coming back. I just want to jump in at Isaiah chapter 25, verse 6 and following. And on this mountain shall the Lord of hosts make unto all the people a feast of fat things, a feast of wines on the lees, of fat things, full of marrow, of wines on the lees, well refined. And he will destroy on this mount, or in this mountain, the face of the covering cast over all the people, and the veil that is spread over all the nations. He will swallow up death in victory, and the Lord God will wipe away tears from off all faces, and the rebuke of his people he will take away off of all of the earth, for the Lord has spoken it. And you may be going, well, yeah, that's prophecy of the resurrection. Paul quotes that in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 55 and 56. When the corruptible has put on incorruptibility, when the mortal has put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying, death is swallowed up in victory. That's Isaiah 25. Yeah, everybody agrees with that. Everybody admits that. That's true. Here's what the commentators, by and large, do not take note of. They do not reveal this in their exegesis. Let's read verses 1 and following carefully. Now remember, chapter 24 that we looked at last week foretold the coming destruction of heaven and earth. Is that an eschatological element or tenet? Of course it is. But it gives us the reason for that destruction. The reason for that destruction would be Israel's violation of Torah. Now, I challenged you last Wednesday that if you knew of anybody, any commentator, any preacher who has ever said that literal, physical heaven and earth will one day be destroyed in our future as a result of Israel's violation of the old law of Moses, then let me know. Not a response. You know why? In their history of commentary, there has never been anyone, to my knowledge, that teaches the destruction of literal, physical, material creation because of Israel's violation of the old law. But that's what Isaiah 24, if taken literally, as people tell me, oh, we got to interpret the Bible literally. Okay. Then you've got to believe that one day God's going to destroy literal, physical heaven and earth as a result of Israel's violation of the law of Moses. Well, wait a minute. 99.9% of all Christians say, no. The law of Moses was fulfilled and removed in the first century. Well, if the law of Moses was fulfilled and removed in the first century, then Isaiah 24 can't be talking about a yet future destruction of literal, physical, material creation as a result of Israel's violation of the law of Moses. Isaiah 25, 1 and following. Now, keeping in mind that the previous chapter, this is one of those cases where chapter divisions are very unfortunate. Chapter 25 is continuing the discussion of the destruction of Israel, the destruction of the people who dwell in the city of confusion, Ariel, which, according to Isaiah 29, was Old Covenant Jerusalem, and that city that's set in the midst of the land. And I shared with you Ezekiel chapter 5, 8, and 9. The Lord said, I have set Jerusalem in the midst of the land. That's the backstory. That's the context. That prediction of that coming destruction of Israel for her violation of Torah, and yet, the glorification of Yahweh as he would rule in the kingdom. So you have destruction and new creation. That's Shemeni Atzerat. Oh, by the way, I just got to take note of this. I can't read Isaiah chapter 25, 1 and following, without taking note of this. Let me see how to frame this as succinctly as possible. But here's what we have. On the very first day of Sukkot, Feast of Harvest, that led directly to Shemeni Atzerat, the Jews read Zechariah 14. Now, what's so significant about that? What is so significant about it is that Zechariah 14 was a prediction of the destruction of Jerusalem and the establishment of a new Jerusalem. Destruction of the old, creation of the new. You have two Jerusalems in Zechariah 14. Now, wait a minute. Here is the Feast of Sukkot, the joy of the nations, one of the most joyous of all of Israel's feast days. And on the very first day of that feast day, that joyous feast day, you're reading what they call the Haftorah. You are reading a prophecy of the coming destruction of Jerusalem. This is good news? Well, no, the destruction of Jerusalem was not within itself as an isolated, independent prophecy, but what would flow from that destruction? In that day, which is the day of the Lord of the destruction of Jerusalem, a river shall flow forth from Jerusalem, and it shall water all of the nations. Oh, and it shall come to pass that all the nations of the earth would come and worship the Lord in this new creation of the new Jerusalem. So here we have the concept of Shemeni Atzerat, because what comes after Sukkot? What comes after Sukkot, which is when they would read the prophecy of the destruction of Jerusalem. And by the way, during Sukkot, they likewise read from Ezekiel 38 and 39, which was a prediction of what? The destruction of the old Israel and the creation of the new in the last days. Folks, you see a train coming here? Are you catching this? This is incredible. In both Ezekiel and Zechariah, yes, you have the prophecy of marvelous things that are coming, but they would come only at the time of the destruction of the old creation. Zechariah 14 is explicitly set in the context of Sukkot. Therefore, the reading and the prediction of the coming judgment of Jerusalem. But flowing from that destruction of the old is the creation of the new, the heavenly Jerusalem. You see how this fits together so wonderfully, so beautifully, and echoes the feast days, and specifically Sukkot and Shemeni Atzerat? And so, keeping in mind that Sukkot, followed by Shemeni Atzerat, was the time for the reading of prophecies about the coming destruction of Jerusalem, followed by the new creation. What do we find in Isaiah 24? Destruction of Ariel, the city of confusion. What follows it? Oh, Lord, you are my God. I will exalt you. I will praise your name, for you have done wonderful things. Your counsels of old are established in truth. For you have made a city a heap, of a defense city a ruin, a palace of strangers to be no city. It shall never be built. Therefore shall the strong people glorify you, and the city of the terrible nations shall fear. Are you following? Are you catching the power of this? Here in this prediction of the resurrection, it is preceded by the destruction of the city. By the way, different translations render this slightly different. And in verse 2, it says, you have made the city a heap, a defense city a ruin. You have turned the temple over to strangers. You have made the temple a palace of strangers. This is talking about the destruction of the Jerusalem temple, ladies and gentlemen. But that prediction of chapter 24 and that prediction of chapter 25, verses 1 to 5, is followed by the prediction of the messianic banquet, messianic wedding banquet, and the resurrection. Folks, these things are interwoven and they cannot be separated. All right? Now, look, that's all I've got time for today. I will not be able to be with you tonight or Wednesday night either. But Larry Siegel will be with you tonight, along with Rick Calvert. And Mike Sullivan will be doing something on Wednesday night. All right? I will also not be able to be with you on Friday this week. Got a lot of things going on right now. My brother in Arkansas is gravely ill. We're not sure if he's going to make it. So I will, not Arkansas, it's Missouri. I will be with him. Okay. I wanted to get my videos in for Monday through Wednesday, but the rest of it will have to be postponed. All right. Have that in your prayers, please. He's a great guy, dedicated Christian. He's got emphysema. He's got COPD. He is due to have a stent installed this week, and we're just hopeful that he can go through that operation without any problem. Okay, thanks for joining me. I'll see you on the flip side.